should start with a little disclaimer here that although I'm a volunteer at the Railroad Museum, member, even made it on the board of directors here, I'm not speaking for them. I'm certainly not speaking for the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission. So, any opinions that show up in here, those are my personal opinions. But mostly this is sort of a factual thing. What is happening? Okay.
I know. It's hard.
First off, first thing you want to know is
How do you go outside?
basically, they never seem to have enough money for what they wanted to do. You know, they dumbed it down or whatever. And the only thing I can tell you is that it is not dead at the state. It's still moving at state speed, which is incredibly slow. Someday, possibly before.
Hey guys, your voices are carrying pretty good. Just try to keep it down a little, please. That's all right, Alan.
The museum has not really been neglected here. The PHMC spent $4.5 million on the museum here recently. It started in 2018. 2018 and 2021, they put a bunch of new stuff at the museum, basically. This was an improvement.
Is that all taxpayer dollars?
It's from the state, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all taxpayer dollars.
For $4.5 million, they saved $350,000 for some signage that they're just starting to get around to now. But you see the little walkway there? Yeah. A few people remember 5 years ago or before, you get in between the trains, except at the ends, you walk over some 2x4s or 2x6s that were laid across the rails. They got slippery if some kid dropped a soda on it or something like that. It was kind of a mess. They basically made a whole bunch of these walkways here, and even though signs are nice, because a narrow place like this, when you're in on those engines, you really couldn't see the narrow ones until you were practically on top of them. Because now you can look up and down and see where you can get across to the next platform. And there's all kinds of new signage inside the museum. When you first walk in the front door, that's someone you may recognize as the train shed at the Reading Terminal, way that way. And at right angles is on the wall. You can't see this picture. At right angles is the Delaware Lackawanna Western Station in Scranton. Picture of it from a long ago too. Signage along the way, in there. Signs along the sides here, kind of directed toward different things you can do inside the museum. In here. We updated the signage by all the different artifacts. So one on the left there is a more common thing. There's usually a picture of whatever they're showing there with a picture from way back when it was actually in use. A lot of statistics on it, and anything unusual about it. Over to the right, you see one where this happens to be a business card. They don't allow us to get into the business card because all kinds of nice stuff in there that could get broken and messed up. So what they did do is they basically put a touch screen on there so you can basically tour inside with that. And that's for a few different places. We have some new video displays out there. You may remember that they've been for a long time for the real post office, picking up the mail along the way. They added one for the snowplow. You may remember way back in the back corner of the museum is a big winch plow. They had a video alongside of it that shows it in use on the Strasburg Railroad. Have one for the slurry board. The slurry board is not actually working, but they put a video there that shows you how it would operate through a sort of animation, including all the click clacks that changes. And what you're looking at here is from the E6 Lindbergh engine. It's not the Lindbergh engine itself, but one of its own class that had a video of the thing running in New Jersey. So guys racing down the road with his car trying to take pictures of this thing and just pull it away from me. Yeah. I have to admit that some of those video displays, they have a tendency to come up and then disappear again as they break down or something. So maybe you'll see these and maybe not. Oh, how about 3D viewers? Remember stereoscopes? Well, there's 6 or 7 different pictures in each of those, and they're different, so old folks will have to see if you can bend down to the kiddie one if you want to see all of them. They have a little stand for the kids to get up to the higher one. It's pointing out toward the south across the fields and stuff, so it's usually pretty bright down there. You get a pretty good view of the stereo pictures. Here's another automated one. Basically, they picked out 10 railroad engineering sites. Like the horseshoe curve, famous trestles, was it the Black Rock tunnel that's near Philadelphia, things like that. And down below there, they have each of those 5 screens. Basically, you can call up 1 or 2 different engineering sites. And there's a few pictures for each. Usually there's 1 or 2 that shows the thing under construction, and they'll show trains that are running through it later on. Those are usually working, but sometimes they have trouble with the touch screen. Or pictures where the signage is a lot of signs like this that look like old train shed or something here. And of course, there's other stuff on the other side of it. So you can why Phoebe White always took the road of anthracite and so forth. And we do have artifacts out there, it's not just some signs. These things will change every once in a while, not monthly, but they get changed periodically. More signs. There's another one here where kids might like this one here. It basically has different people who work on the railroad. If you lift it, it explains what it is they do on the railroad. You may remember that you could take stairs and go into a pit underneath one of the steam engines. The trouble with that is one wasn't well lit up and didn't really know what you were looking at under there. Well, they made some changes. On the back wall here, they have a bunch of tools here. From the picture to the left, the sign alongside there basically explains what the different tools are, what they might be used for. But there's also a workbench down below. Those tools are fastened down. Of course, they can't really move them. Push some cards up in the front here. Basically, have sort of pictures of the tools, and then on one side it explains what they're used for. So kids can handle that. And on the other wall, under the engine, on the left side there, you'll see there's about 6 signs that show different portions of the underside of that engine. And explains what's important about it, what they're looking for if you're trying to maintain the engine, why it's important. And you see the number down at the bottom there, number 2 there. Well, when they label that part up in the engine to help you find it. And a whole section called Trainworks. Kids often like this because they're still, this is where they move the place where the kids can shovel coal into the pretend fire. There's basically 2 engines there that they can play with. But this goes into what kind of locomotives are there out there? Why are the flanges on the inside of the rails? They actually have a demonstration there where they show what happens if they're on the outside, or if they're on both sides of the rail. What happens if you try to go around a curve in that way? What kind of jobs on the railroad? How do couplers work? What happened before there were air brakes? Like this thing's not always working right, but what they're trying to show you is on the left. We're going to try to stop a train, basically hit a button to start a timer. And you see the 3 wheels there. Well, basically you have to start the first one, turn it many, many times to try to set the brakes manually. Then you go to the second, and then you go to the third. And when you get the third car's brake set, then the train stops and you see what your time is, as opposed to over on the right, you press the button, put the brakes on in a few seconds, do the same thing. kids like that when it's working. It has a tendency to break down. And this. I said they saved $350,000 for doing more signage and stuff, particularly outside signage. Part of that was also going to be used for the roundhouse, whenever that gets built. This entryway, I saw a museum in Pennsylvania when I first came here, but it actually took me a few visits before I realized that mishmash in the window was supposed to be railroad. three different fonts, and the bottom two rows are sitting on a big curve, so there's no place you could actually stand. You could actually see the whole word at one time. Very strange. Well, they're going to try to fix that up. That's what they propose to do with it. It's an artist sketch, which unfortunately I had to sort of scan and then put in here, so it's not as clear as it should be, but that'll be a little more obvious. Here's a picture of the museum from the road. If you're coming on 741, coming from the east, the only clue that there is a railroad museum here is this little sign by the road up front here. So they wanted to make it stand out a little bit better. See this area over here? I've got the little gable here. And here we've got this big flat area over here. I'm going to work on this one here. First we'll do the gable. Make it look like that.
What stuff you can read.
Yes.
It's nice.
And then for that, let's see. This area right here. Go at the bottom, what they want to do. Let's put that on it. You know, see this is the door. That's that double door down there. All right. But anyway, between those two, it should be pretty obvious. Coming down the road, what's there. Okay. A few months ago, the Northwestern 611 stopped over at the Railroad Museum. I was there for about 3 months. And was sitting out in the yard, and they made sure to move some engines so you couldn't really see it from the street. You had to come into the museum to get to the yard. On the other hand, they did not advertise that very well. So I don't think that too many people even knew it was sitting over there. It was scheduled to leave in mid-May, which it did. It was only in the last month that they had a presentation set up. They did a combination presentation of looking at the restoration shop at the museum, plus going out to see 611. And there were usually people out there by 611 that worked on it and actually knew a lot about it. People that came from Virginia with it and so forth. And Steve was out there a lot too. Every time I went out there, Steve was still working on it. That was like $25 that got split between the museum and the Virginia people. Unfortunately, it was only in place for like 4 weeks, and then 611 was moved to Strasburg for a couple of weeks of running and then went to Virginia. This was part of the presentation here. I threw this in here because there's a picture of Al Martin. He doesn't like his picture taken too much. He doesn't like you in his shop very much. When you go on a tour, you usually see him up in the front, glaring down there, making sure nobody actually touches anything in his shop. But this is a quote from him here. Preserve rather than restore rather than replace, and replace only when necessary. At the time of the presentation, which like I say was only about a month ago, they were currently working on the V6 switch engine and its tender. They're working on a crossing tower, a Reading Stoker model, and a Pittsburgh Lake Erie caboose. I can tell you the V6 switch engine, that's already been primed and whatever. There's need to work on the final painting for that done. The tender is being put back together now. Crossing tower is pretty much done. Spoke on the PLE and caboose. They're doing some stuff inside to get some parts for it. They now have a vendor working to sandblast the H10, which is the third engine that's supposed to go in the roundhouse someday. All right. We have been told PHMC is currently prioritizing two things: accessibility and education. Restoration comes later. And you can stop here and say it's not that they don't care about that. Like most of us, they have a budget, and essentially the priority is on accessibility, getting people in there, making everything accessible, educating people when they come in there, having them leave with some appreciation of railroading or what people went through. It means that a lot of the restoration stuff is going to come down to like the Friends and so forth. Okay, right now, Friends of the Railroad Museum are paying over half the employees at the Railroad Museum. In fact, chances are that if you go to the museum, you won't see an actual state employee. People who take the tickets and people that are out on the floor that might be explaining things are either volunteers or someone paid by the Friends of the Railroad Museum, usually. We even kept these guys working, even during the 14 months that the museum was shut down, which was not easy. But that's a listing. On the left is who the state is paying at the museum. On the right is what the Friends of the Railroad Museum are paying. How many people they are paying. So we really do pay for more than half. Okay, now. PHMC is paying for Al Martin, who's in charge of restoration. He's called curator, but basically he's the restoration shop guy, and then he has an assistant. Otherwise, other than those two people, and Al says he spends half his time doing paperwork for the state, so we'll say a person and a half. Restoration is done by volunteers that come in. There's not a whole lot of them, there's a few of them, and they come in off and on, like being here for a few hours, once a week or something. So restoration is going slowly. However, Friends of the Railroad Museum for a few years now, have had a part-time carpenter. He's an Amishman. He's very good. He does excellent work. He made a new wooden frame for the V6 tender. That'll all be hidden. I mean, you won't see it once they assemble it again, that frame, but you'd think he'd be making furniture that's so finely done. This guy's very good. He's also more recently paying for a part-time welder. It's the guy who works for Thaddeus Stevens Institute. And besides us paying him a little bit part-time, he's been trying to bring in some of his classes to show them real work and give them some work experience. And Al's apparently been okay with that because they've been a couple times now to do some work for us. There's some talk of making this a more formal agreement with Thaddeus. It's sort of some kind of work study kind of program. Okay. And in the shop, these guys have access to blueprints online. In order to do that, essentially we had to get them on our network, which we basically do by broadcasting over to the restoration shop from the main museum. We got them a 55-inch screen and a computer and a printer. And then we had to create a database because some of the blueprints they're working with were lent to us to work on an engine, but they do not want them public. They don't want them publicized. They don't want them to be available to the public. So we had to create a separate database that's not linked in any way with the stuff that the public can see or could get access to. And we got an oversized scanner in the basement, scanned in a bunch of blueprints and stuff, and created a system out there in the shop so that even people who aren't tremendously computer literate can actually find things and bring them up. Also, there's a pole barn that's out there already, and it was in need of painting and repair of one of the large doors. We recently did that. What else are we doing? Well, here, this is set up to do scanning of things like negatives and photographs. Well, the scanner you see up here in the front, that's paid for by the Friends of the Railroad Museum. The computer and the screens are paid for by the Friends of the Railroad Museum. To send pictures across a network paid for by the Friends of the Railroad Museum. To go on the servers that are paid for by the Friends of the Railroad Museum. And ultimately, we will send a lot of that stuff up where the public can see it on the Pennsylvania Railroad Museum webpage, which is paid for by the Friends of the Railroad Museum. And the fancy database that allows us to sit there and search for these photographs and charts and timetables and stuff like that on here is also free by the Friends of the Railroad Museum. Now, what's on there is not just photographs, but not just like pictures of engines and cars and stuff, but we have maps on there, there's blueprints, there's different kinds of diagrams, there's ads. Again, you can see a bunch of ads for Phoebe Snow and the Road of Anthracite. Phoebe, yeah. I don't know whether you people would be interested. I could create some kind of a show to explain how you can actually use this website, because it's not always obvious how to find stuff out. We're in the basement, so we're going to get a big scanner and do those blueprints. Well, besides for the shop, we're scanning other blueprints and stuff down here. Oddly enough, the museum was in receipt of all the engineering and shop drawings, blueprints for the Vulcan Iron Works in Wilkes-Barre. Unfortunately, before we got them, Agnes came through here and flooded them, so a lot of stuff was all stuck together and a mess to get into, but another guy and I are working down here in the basement trying to make some kind of sense of it, scan them and put them into a database where we can find things on them. They are in hundreds of boxes and they are kind of a mess. And sometimes there's damage. This is some of the paperwork in one of those boxes.
Yeah.
You see this clear space here? Basically the paper was wrinkled during that flood, and when the mud came in, everything inside that wrinkle was still clean. And this over here has actually been partially cleaned. It used to look like that part. And here's pieces from the tops of each of those pages there. Basically had a tear out where there used to be a rivet through it, and at some point it all got torn loose. We had to find the loose pieces and attach them to the right pages and stuff. Most of them aren't that bad. But you can see I spent, I don't know, 2-3 hours or something cleaning these up before I could do the scanning. Here's a solari board. We got it for 30th Street, and ever since we've had it. They've been grumbling in Philadelphia they want it back. But meanwhile, we put up a display there. The Friends paid for that background there to make it look a little closer to the stonework back to 30th Street. The state, of course, paid for the screen over the right, which is sort of emulation of the solari board in operation. If you haven't been to the museum in recent years, yes, the stuff in the yard is still rusting away. However, there's a little bit less of it rusting away because a small group of people, volunteers, about once a month goes out there and basically scrapes and wire brushes and paints. They're not doing a restoration, they're just kind of doing a preservation. I worked on this one myself back around 2018 or 2019. Fixed up the turntable house. The turntable itself is a mess, but the state claims they're going to rebuild the turntable to make the turntable itself a little better before they put the roundhouse up. Here you can see we're starting on the Tower View car. Anyway, that's been continuing. Except in the middle of winter, there's usually one Saturday each month that I call anyone who's interested to come out there and work on stuff. It's usually just painting and scraping. It's nothing, you don't require any special skills. You may recognize this area out in front of the museum. It's basically in front of the staff parking lot. They refer to it as the corral out there, which is 4 items in there. The Friends of the Railroad Museum wish to put up what is essentially like a a shed, like a train shed or something over the top of that. And this is what the plan looks like. That train shed there would actually be a walkway, a raised walkway down the middle so that people can get up high enough they can actually look in the windows at the cars or engines or something. It's not necessarily the same things that are sitting in that area right now. It will be that raised walkway in there. They're more likely to put stuff in a passenger car or something in there than things that you'll actually see something inside of. These plans have gone to the states and they're chewing on them and whatever. And they come back and say, well, you know, fine, you're gonna put this up, but then what happens when it needs to be painted or the roof's leaking or whatever? And the friends have agreed to do maintenance on it too. We take that on also. And we're still waiting for approval to actually go ahead with that. And if we ever get that done, someday we would like to put another pole barn out there. It would be kind of in front of, this is the existing restoration shop here. Well, basically down here in front of there would be another pole barn where we could put in a big engine. It'd be long enough to put in things like the M1, M1B, or put in the GG1 or something to be worked on. And that is about it. Do you have any questions?
How much too short is the one that's there now?
Actually, I don't know.
15 foot.
They tell me it's not long enough for either one of those engines, but
Well, what's your budget?
we haven't raised the money for the corral yet.
No, but what's your operating budget a year, the friends?
Steve, do you remember what a year's budget would be?
Well, our budget had been set when I was treasurer at about $750,000, including payroll and other expenses. That's our operating
No,
budget.
but
We also
pretty
have,
good for all these people you're hiring and everything.
well, the budget right now is at about $550,000 because since we reopened, we're only operating 5 days a week. And I'd say our income is down about $20,000 a year.
But is the friends keep the ticket receipts or who gets the
We
income?
keep
I
half.
get half of them.
Okay, you can't half for the state gets in.
But we keep, anytime we have an event, we have to pay a 5% licensing fee to the state, but we keep the rest. Like whales and owls, that's 95% ours. We also have the ability to solicit and get donations. But most of the donations go into the restricted accounts, like for the roundhouse, ready for roundhouse and stuff. We can't use that to operate.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so we get a lot of money off of that, half of the ticket receipts. We've suggested the state it would be nice if they raise the rate from $10, which is pretty cheap these days for a museum, to something else, but they're getting a little reluctant, but it is under consideration, that's all I can tell you. If they do it, they'd probably do it for all the museums at once.
I don't even know that they sell museum pass.
Pass? Well,
Yeah, does the state sell museum
Not
pass?
that we know.
Yeah.
And the tickets must be used the day you buy them.
yeah.
You can't go in and buy tickets for kids down a week later. You think you would modify that, but they don't report on that.
If you know the right person to ask, you can get a ticket that's good. You do have some free passes that are undated.
Well, I mean, you know,
So at the front desk, because they sell them at the front desk.
one guy, I was in there one day talking to Allison about something, we dropped it off, and the guy said, asked me, hey, can I buy tickets for next week for my kids? And I said, I don't know. And we went up to the desk, and the guy said, absolutely not. The day you buy them, you must use them.
Yeah.
And,
Unfortunately, we don't do online sales. We're about ready to start online store sales. That's like probably a week away, maybe, Allison said. But unfortunately, the state forces the point of sale system on us. And the last 2 point of sales have been failures, really. They just don't work, and the state is bringing another one in. And, I don't know whether this new one will do online sales, it should, but, you know, they're state contractors, and you know how that works.
I've got to tell one story. Tom Fluck and I, about 2 years ago, went up to the Reading Museum, and we introduced ourselves as volunteers from Strasbourg, and we started talking, and we said to them, man, you guys are lucky you don't have the state. They looked at us and said, man, you guys are lucky you have the state. So I got to tell you, the grass is always greener on the other side. Hey, wait, I hope you didn't record that.
Hey,
Delete that.
hey, here's a fun fact. When 611 is out in the road pulling a full train, it uses 200 gallon of water a mile.
200 gallon a mile?
A mile.
Oh, Jesus,
When
man.
it's pulling a train.
Now,
Now,
what's
in
your-
Strasbourg, putting along at 30 mile an hour with a couple wooden coaches, no.
Yeah.
But when they run it down south with 14 cars going up the grade,
Now, what's the new tourist railroad carrying on? What's he talking about?
I think it's gonna run somewhere on the Buckingham Bridge. but I'm
Because
not
he said
sure.
outstanding, it's based on
I
outstanding.
think it's from.
Yeah, that's the one I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what you're talking, that's what I'm
I
saying.
think it's from Goshen, Stafford, or something like that. Now, don't quote me on that, but I think that's what they're gonna do. It's 30-some miles up through the mountains, through a couple tunnels. They'll be able to get $120 or $30 for a wooden bench nailed down to a.
Because that's where that one, we went down to they opened the old original tunnel as a hiking trail next to the tunnel that they use for the trains. I was trying to think the name of that tunnel.
Oh, are you talking about
On the Blue Ridge there.
up down at Cumberland Valley?
No, it's right outside of Staunton on the,
Oh.